Hi everyone, it's Linda from Linda Z's in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and I have a fun video for you today. We are going to talk about the quilt behind me, the modern quilt, but I'm going to introduce another guest speaker that's just going to do a little smattering of telling you what our 101 modern quilt blocks are all about. They are fabulous on color, design, just lots of technique for quilting. So I wanted you to kind of experience what this is all about, and hopefully you'll love it so much you'll join one of the clubs. But before I get into introducing what I want to tell you about, I've started, as you know, with a lot of different information about threads. I wanted to show you my personal thread chart. I've talked quite a bit about embroidery, and I actually have, because this is a little summer event, you may have seen this in one of my other videos. This is an OESD, and I believe it was like June or July of 2020. It's the Spree Club, but you can actually order this design separately if you don't belong to the Spree Club. And if I turn around, you can see wish upon a star, a fish. So it's just kind of fun to be able to have, a little, it's just a simple little shirt. There's nothing to it, and you could easily put a little design on there. But the key thing is to get the right thread colors. And what I do personally with my own, first of all, like this thread, this happens to be number right on the top, it'll tell you 676. So I look at this thread chart and I go down the list and I find 676 on here. And it says right next to it, it's on page, or it's on column number 8. So I flip open the book and you see the numbers here at the bottom. And I go over to number 8 and I go right down the chart and I find 676. Well, it happens to be, you can see it right here, it happens to be right at the top. And that means that I circle that because then I know I have this color in my stash. I have just about everything, but not all of them. I'm trying to collect and make sure that I get them all. So I would highly recommend, because the thread color, you can get the paper ones that have the paper color, but this is actually the thread itself. And you can see when you put it up here, it really is the right color. And that's true with all of these. You can go ahead and go down your chart and circle what you've got, and then you've got a good one. And I know these are for sale, and I've got Teresa here. Teresa, could you do me a big favor and put this on for everybody on the website? Or if it's not on the website, maybe on the day that this video goes out, they get this, and it's the Floriani color thread chart. So I hope that gives you a little bit more help. There's nothing worse than trying to do a project. You want to do it quick, and you want all the colors there, and then you have to figure out, well, where are they and what color are they and what is this? This is just so easy to be able to do it like this. So let's get started. I want to give you a little bit of a smattering of idea of how to do this 100, the 100 modern quilt blocks. And I know you're going to love it, and sign up. It's very inexpensive. I think they have a little register here, and you can do it at your leisure. You don't have to do it all at one time. You might want to get bored one day and just do one block, and then, a week later, you might want to do another block. I just saw today, Suellen brought in her leftovers, and I forget what she called it. It was the leftover quilt or something. It was so gorgeous. She took some of her and did the same quilt. It's totally, totally different because she used all kinds of different colors. So color theory is in here too. So enjoy it, everyone. Have fun.
Hi, this class is talking about blocks 90 or 80 through 90 in the 100 modern quilt blocks. But we're also going to be talking about the borders on the colorful quilt. Last month, when we were looking at the blocks from 70 to 80, we talked about putting this stripe and not using the twisted ribbon just being much more traditional. So then as I was looking at this quilt, and we had already talked about having the inset triangles here on the side, I like the way that works, but I also think it still needs a little something. And this quilt, exactly how I started out thinking about it, but you know, it kind of speaks to you and tells you what it wants. And so then as I started looking at options, I thought, you know, the squares on point was kind of a theme through this. So I looked at this and I like it, but I think it might just be a little bit too big. Now, I'm using AccuQuilt to make the borders. And AccuQuilt did just come out with a 4-inch cube. And so if I invested in that and got a 4-inch cube, then it might work. So that's one option. So, but it just seemed a little bit too big to me. So then as I looked at, well, let's make it a little smaller. So I made these, and I had the color changes. I probably should have turned this one around so the green was next to the yellow, but I wasn't quite sure on that one. The one right now that I'm leaning toward is this one. And this one does kind of just a gradual change going from dark to light within each of the quarter square triangles. So this is where I'm leaning toward right now. And so this is kind of what it would look like. I'm going to put this here just to give it a little more length versus this. And I think this might just be a little bit too big. Here, let's just move this down. We do this. These design walls really help. At home, I didn't have a place to put up all of this on a design wall. So when I got here today, it was pretty fun. Whoops, still, I need to get that top corner. There we go. So I'm thinking, I still think that the squares that I used from the 6-inch cube are just a little bit too big. So I'm going to be using these. Now, to make these, I have a couple different options. I could use, there are two different ways that I could make this. So one of the options is to do a large square that I would run through like this, and I end up with the two squares. And let me run one through here. And we'll just run a little piece of this through. And you can go up to four layers at a time. So I'll run this one through also. And I'll run this one through also. You'll see this goes so much faster than hand cutting, and it is very, very accurate, so that as I finish cutting these, then I know that these are all exactly the same size. So now I have my squares. And what I can do to sew these then is I'm going to match these up. So I'll have a black one, and one of the light, and one of the light. And now I need to draw a line. So I'm going to grab my sandboard, because the sandboard keeps things from shifting. And I'll use the sandboard and a marking tool to draw a line that will then show me exactly where to sew. So here's the sandboard, and it just holds things in place. So as I put this here, I think that this will show the best on here. And I have this ruler that is 1/2 inch wide. So you can either, as you're marking something like this, you can draw on each side of a 1/2 inch wide ruler, or you can use a ruler that goes point to point and just draw one line down the middle and then sew a 1/4 inch on each side. I just kind of like doing the 1/2 inch and then sewing right on that line. So that's what I'm doing today here. So now I have my 2 squares. And I'm going to line up the corners. And then I'm going to sew down. And when you're doing this, you can have a whole bunch of different blocks all lined up. And then just chain stitch. And chain stitching, what that means is, well, the machine says, what foot are you using? I have to tell the machine what foot I'm using. And then engage this. Let's put the foot up. Now we'll put the foot down. And then we'll do the next one. And by doing this, I don't have to worry about, is it a 1/4 inch seam or not? I just look at sewing right on the line. Oops. And I ran out of bobbin thread. Let me just add some bobbin thread real quickly. Renina does have these ginormous bobbins, and so it's always a surprise to run out of thread. But it's quick to change. Here we go. Line it back up. Now we'll sew down the other side. And then what we'll do is we will take these and cut on the, so we're going to cut right down the center of these blocks. And then we'll open them up, and I'm going to do a mix match. So I'll take the light one and the dark one, and I'm going to put them crosswise, and so that then I can draw the line here. I'm going to finger press. Anytime I'm dealing with bias, I don't like to use steam at all. So I'm going to draw another line here. And we'll put these together so that I have the light one and the dark one, and I crisscross them, and I'll have the seams opposing so I can nest. When nesting the seams means I can kind of pull them right up to each other. And I'm going to line up the corners. Make sure those seams are nested really well, because that gives us then a tight corner in the middle. We'll go back the other way. You're going to end up with 2 blocks, and they can be matching or they don't have to be. It depends on what you would pair the other part of these blocks with. You could team them with different colors. So, but this is how you would make a two-colored half-square triangle. This is a pretty standard kind of application, and it's used in lots of different quilts. But this is how, then I would take this and I'd use my lock block ruler and I would trim it, and here we have then another one. So that you can see that that's one way. The way that I think I'm going to do it though is this way. Let me get this out of the way. Because I want more control over exactly where the different colors fall. And so what I want to do is take my color wheel of my fabrics and lay them all out in the order that I want them in. And then I'm going to go, and I have a different die that I can use. And this die does quarter square triangles. And so I can make a pass through this, and I can end up with then, you can see this is the same, I can use this same size here. And I could layer it up with this. And I could layer it up with, let's see, with this. I think I only want one. So we'll just open that up. Oh, wait a sec, I have this right here I can use. And I make sure that it's covering all the different edges. I don't want to lose any corners. I get this all lined up. Make sure I can come down just a little bit. If I didn't already have these squares from getting ready to do the other way, I would have just cut this just a little bit bigger. But I think we're okay. So then if I pass this through, this gives me a little bit more control over fabric placement. And yet I know that these are all absolutely the right size. And not only that, but they have all the corners cut. And so that as I look here, it shows exactly where I'm going to want to sew them. And so I can do my light to dark kind of feeling. And I have the 4 different pieces. And I can lay the colors out in whatever order I want and just start sewing together. And the AccuQuilt has these little corners that show you exactly where to sew, and so that it's really easy to have a 1/4 inch seam. And as I've done this, I used that method making these. I didn't have to go back and retrim. So it just gives me a little bit more control. This is the inner border that I'm thinking about right now. And I think I'm going to use the AccuQuilt. It's die number, let me give you the number. Die number 4. And so this is die number 4 on the 6-inch cube. And that is how I did this. So the other thing I wanted to do before we get started on the new blocks, I'm going to get this all out of the way now, is I wanted to look at the blocks from last month and see what worked and what didn't work. Because there are a couple of changes that I feel like I need to make just based on the blocks from last month. So one of them that I was not as happy with was this one with the zebras. And I really like those zebra. I like that zebra fabric, but they're not plumb. They're not going at a diagonal. They're tilted just a little bit too much for me. So I think I'm going to put this one into my orphan block pack. And I'll use that fabric again, but I'll use it in a different way so that the zebras are not canted. So that's one. And then this one with the sea monsters, I thought it was going to be okay. But as I put it on, I just didn't do it for me. So in this case, I really like this block and want it in this. And it needs to be this size. I can't have a smaller fussy cut and have the sea monster still fit. So in this case, I recut. and I will just re-sew that with the sea monster in that same block, but now he's more on point. Now it works more on point. The others kind of work. They, those were the ones that did not work for me. And then as I'm looking at the quilt, this is where you really need to start looking at, okay, how many more blocks, where are you going to finish? And so I want to make sure that there is a block at the edge, at the top and the bottom of each corner. And so that means I need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I need to have 7 blocks across. I need to have an odd number going across so that I end up with the block sticking out that will have black on 3 sides on each corner. That means also I have to have an odd number going down so that I end up with the same thing as I go down. So I'm going to be adding on. I don't have that over here. I need to add 1 more block here. And then I need to add, I'm going to be adding another row, and I'm going to be adding onto the bottom. So I will still have a few more blocks that I'll prune out of this quilt to have it end up being the size I wanted. So if there's a block in there that's just not quite making it for me, I'll probably take it out. My guess is that this block really works better if it's plumb instead of at an angle. When it's plumb, it starts having that 3D effect. When it's at an angle, it's not bad, but it just doesn't have that 3D effect. So my guess is this is another one that I will put in my orphan block pile. So let's look at the blocks from today, because we'll be replacing those and adding on to the sides. So block number 80 was kind of a fun one. Block number 80 is, it has 2 4 patches, and then it has a focus fabric. And what's kind of interesting is in the modern quilt, most of them seem to be off center in some way or off kilter in some way. And so this one for the Tula Pink fabric, I didn't really have anything with little polka dots. And I was looking over the quilt to see, okay, what fabrics have I not used? Because I wanted to be as scrappy as possible. And I had this, this reminds me of a topographical map. And I've used it in other colorways in the map, like here it is in the blue-green. But I have not used it here. I've not used all of these. So I pulled out these 2 colors. This is a real simple one to make. You do the 2 4 patches, you add the square to the 4 patch, and then you're going to sew the big square, and then you'll sew the one last seam joining that together. So that was kind of a fun one. For the red, white, and blue quilt, then this one, I wanted to still, if you look at her fabric selection, she did use the plain, because she uses plain fabric, non-figurative, in almost every single block. In fact, she has. But she had the small kind of polka dotty feel to this one. So looking at the fabric options with the Amanda Murphy fabric, this one had the small kind of polka dotty feel. So I started with that as a foundation. And then I looked over the quilt. Okay, what fabrics do I need to have more so that it's going to blend in? And as I looked around, I had less of the stripy zigzag than I had of some of the other fabrics. And so that is what I chose to put in with this block. So that is block number 80. Now, we'll move those off to the side. And we'll look at block 81.